Okay, so here we're pulling the actual motor apart with a screwdriver, and you just put that in between two plastic pieces and pull it apart. It's pretty easy and should only take you a couple of minutes. And it just pops off. So now we're pulling the internals apart and we're going to lay them down on a table so that we can work with them later down the line. So the first thing we're going to do is cut off these metal pieces that act as contacts for the inside of the motor. This is an older style motor. The newer styles you can just pull these pieces off and there's no cutting to do at all. Okay, we did miss something before, and that's drilling a ventilation hole. This hole is required because the DCC chips get very hot and need some air to cool them down. Okay, so here we're bending pieces out of the wheel pickup contacts so that any old circuits are not going to be made with the internal motor and other parts that are inside there. Also to make a little bit of room for our DCC chip at one end of the motor as well. Okay, so this is our Hornby DCC chip, and it comes in a packet. They're fairly inexpensive and they work really well. So we are now going to cut off the socket end because that is designed to go into a Hornby locomotive, and we need to solder the ends to our motor. So we're just stripping the wires here. The particular chip you pick up will have instructions on which wires you need to use, and you should cut off the rest because they're not going to fit inside the motor. Okay, so I've sped this up, but basically we're soldering the motor together to the chip and the pickups to the chip as well. It can be a little bit fiddly, so you need to be a decent solderer to do this. So one wire goes to the left motor, the other one goes to the right. So after we've done the motor, obviously the rail pickups need to be soldered to the wires. So I'm just putting them in a clamp so they don't go anywhere. It just makes it easier to solder to if I don't have to hold what I'm working on. I can spend more time thinking about where my soldering iron is rather than holding on to what I'm soldering together. Okay, so we've finished soldering everything together, and now we're going to put everything back together. Okay, so the first thing goes in are these little gears. They're a little fiddly to get back in, and you've got to get them in the right orientation and into the right clips. The motor goes in next. Just be careful here you don't disconnect what you've soldered, because it has happened to me once or twice in doing this. This is my third motor, done in about a week. Okay, so we're now putting in the wheel pickups, and it can be a little fiddly to get the wires out of the way so you can put them back in, but it's fairly straightforward. You also sometimes need to bend bits out of the way so they don't come into contact with certain bits of the plastic frame. I think this next piece I put in is a little bit tricky in that sort of sense. Yeah, you can see here I'm having trouble getting it back in, but that's just because there's a couple of metal pieces we folded before that just need to be folded to avoid coming in contact with certain things inside. Just take it slow. The slower you go, the more time you spend about thinking about what you're doing, the less likely it is you're going to break something. Okay, so we've got everything in, and we just need to move wires around so they're not coming into contact with anything. And actually we haven't put the wheels back in, so we'll do that in just a second as soon as previous me finishes putting the other parts back in and making sure they're not going to collide with anything. Okay, putting the wheels back in now. So just making sure the contacts are still rubbing up against the wheels. If they bend too far in, you'll end up with a motor that's not able to function because the wheels can't pick up any power off the track and pass that to the motor. Okay, so we've got the wheels back in, wires all clear, we've glued the DCC chip in, and doing a little bit of a test fit. Unfortunately, I don't get it in. There's stuff inside colliding with the plastic bottom piece. So we're just going to literally cut them off. And this is a little hard. The plastic's fairly thick, and there's a little bit of wiggling you have to do to get it off. Unless you have very strong hands and a very sharp pair of scissors. There we go. Previous me got both off. Okay. We're just snapping everything back together now. And you should hear a lot of little clicks. And we're done. Essentially just making sure the wheels still are springy and everything's still rolling. And okay, just a small demonstration. Didn't end up with a lot of footage. I ended up with a lot of derailments controlling two trains. But do note this, don't use DCC chips with power functions. It doesn't work, period. I've tried, it doesn't work. There is some sort of logic chip in each power functions motors that prevent them from being modified. It's very annoying, sad, but true, unfortunately.